Hey, what's up, guys? I think I got the jump on this coronavirus thing. This is my 4th video, so I've been talking about this long before it became a thing. And if you've been following this video series, then you know more than about 99% of the population who is relying on the mainstream media to provide them the crappy information and to ask the most idiotic questions known to man. So I want to start by a couple corrections that I have based on new information. First, I said in the last video that it appears that 85% of the population is not getting sick. This is not correct. It's a widely variable response to this. It's certainly not 85% of the people are getting sick. Most people are getting sick. And they're getting a very specific, identifiable set of symptoms that I'll talk about in just a second. But it's important to understand, I need to emphasize, these symptoms are highly variable between individuals. Okay, so when I say a fever, that fever, it's commonly 102, 103, quite high, but it can be 99 or 100. But this virus appears, most people have a fever with this virus. That fever, you can, if you don't take your temperature, you can feel it with hot flashes, sweats, shivering. In addition, unlike the common cold, this virus causes body ache, so it feels like you got your ass kicked by the flu. It also causes a headache, like a sinus infection, and it almost certainly is a sinus infection. That's exactly what it is. About 10%, again, that's consistent, have gastrointestinal pain. So what happens then is the person's infected, and 2 to 14 days after they get exposure, they will get mild symptoms. And again, these symptoms that I've already listed for you are really a Frankenstein hybrid between influenza and the common cold and common sinus infections, which are usually caused by coronaviruses. And so I call this stage 1 COVID. All these symptoms are indicative of stage 1 COVID. In about 15% of cases, they often appear to get better for a few days. Sometimes they don't get better at all, but often they appear to get better for a few days or don't get better after a week or two. And often they take a sudden turn for the worse. Suddenly they need a respirator, they're gasping for breath, they're coughing, they can't breathe. Now, it's important to identify this coughing that is occurring because people freak out. Oh my God, I'm coughing, I got a coronavirus. No, probably not. First of all, have you been sick for the last couple of weeks and the cough suddenly developed? That could be coronavirus. Second of all, is the cough a dry, hacking cough, or is it this, we call this non-productive, it's a non-productive cough, or is it from, and you need to think about this, there's a thing called post-nasal drip, where you got snot dripping down the back of your throat, and that drips right on the spot where the air tube and the stomach tube meet. So it often feels like it's the air tube that is making you cough, but it's really, the snot dripping down the back of your throat 99% of the time. Okay, if that is what it is, and you got a stuffy nose, you do not have, very unlikely that you have this coronavirus 19. You have another coronavirus, and we really want to avoid you getting infected. So lay low and get better, and don't go to the emergency room or go to the doctor, because you will end up being a super spreader, and everyone who follows you into the emergency room gets sick. So that's great. Guy goes in for a heart attack and gets coronavirus. So don't call the doctor if you have these symptoms. And you may call his office and let him know that you had these symptoms, but don't demand to speak to the doctor. Don't pull a Karen. I am outraged. Just play it chill. Let your doctor's office know that you're having these symptoms, which I again call stage 1 coronavirus, COVID-19. Again, 15% of the cases regress to stage 2. And they get that dry cough. They're coughing from the lungs, not from the throat, not from the sinuses. And they're starting to feel a little short of breath. And they're not feeling any better. That's the time you call your doctor. That's the time your doctor is going to tell you to go to the emergency room. And they're going to make arrangements to put you in quarantine and isolation and so on. It's recorded that that a high proportion of these patients will in fact die. That is not absolutely correct, so long as we can keep the hospitals open and keep the hospitals from being flooded all at once. The death rate for this should be no more than the common flu. And we're seeing this in South Korea, which has virtually put all, they have got a handle on it. Their death rates are down to flu levels, 0.1%, versus 35 times more potent spread in the United States, lethality in the United States and in Italy. Now, why was South Korea able to do this? Does anyone know? Anyone? Bueller? Believe it or not, they are using an internet app that, it may be a bill, it may just be a posting on the government website. But in any event, the entire population has downloaded this app, and it tracks your movements. So if someone tests positive, everyone who came into contact with him in the last 14 days gets an instant message from this app, and they're told to self-quarantine and follow procedures if they get infected or if they are infected. So, that's how South Korea is doing it. I don't even know if that would work here. Can you imagine? People would challenge it just out of spite. Why am I so pessimistic about containment? Why do I think, and I do think, newsflash, everybody's going to get this, or half the population is going to get this, 100 million people at least. Why am I saying that? Because of science and logic. Influenza spreads like wildfire and we can't contain it. Well, influenza has a 2 to 3 day incubation period. This thing is up to 14 days, and we've had 19, 20, 29 days incubation period. Again, variable. It slips through the cracks. And in addition, this thing causes a huge amount of viral shedding, it's called, right in the beginning. So apparently people are infectious, the most infectious, right before they get sick. Let me repeat that. It appears that other than the time when they're, on a respirator with virus filling their lungs, people are most infectious in the hours and days right before they get sick. Yeah. It sheds viruses at 1,000 times the rate of SARS, for example. It also lives for several days on surfaces and several hours in the air. The flu virus lives for, minutes, sometimes hours, in the air. It doesn't really reside on surfaces for very long. Alas, alack, coronaviruses do. As I said that in my very first video a month before this crisis even started, or at least before we knew it had started. So long story short, I was home today with my good friend Rush Limbaugh, who was downplaying this threat and bitterly denying and decrying the canceled events. So I want to take the opportunity to respond to that, because he is 99 and 44/100% right all the time. And he is not right about this. He's simply not. So let's talk about what's going to happen if we don't slow this down and everybody gets this thing at once. Let's not talk about, I've already told you what happens to the individual. It's really not that much more than the flu, to be honest. It's not much more dangerous than the flu. So what's dangerous about it is that it can spread so massively and so broadly that you inundate healthcare. And then people who need not basic, but ICU, intensive care unit healthcare, they don't get it. So they die. And the death rate goes from, 0.1% where they could have helped the person survive with round-the-clock nursing care. Now all the people who need round-the-clock nursing care don't survive, and that could be thousands and thousands and tens of thousands. So we want to avoid having everybody get the disease at once. They're slow rolling this through the population. That's the purpose of the cancellations. That's why the schools are being canceled. Make sure everybody doesn't come down with it at once. Keep everybody at home if possible. And then the hospitals aren't going to be flooded with patients all at once. Oh, you'll still get it. You just won't all get it in the same 2-week period. This thing's going to be around this year, next year, and probably the year after that. And that's not even the worst of it. I'm not fear-mongering. I'm just telling you this little thing called science. But first of all, I want to tell you the worst-case scenario. Why we don't want hospitals flooded. Okay? Let's say the average hospital bed large hospital in the city might have 30 or 40 ICU beds. Got that? 30 or 40. So what happens if 5,000 people show up at the emergency room? Whoops. What if only 1,500 need respirators? What if you can increase the capacity, double, triple? Let's increase it tenfold. We're up to 400 beds. Oh, look at that. 400, 10 times the average number. Well, you still got 1,100 people who need respirators who ain't going to get them. 1,100 people who are going to die at that hospital. So we want to avoid that. And how do we avoid that? Well, as you might expect, we have plans. Other hospitals will rush in supplies. The National Guard will rush in medical workers from other areas. The Army has emergency mass tents. Yeah, you didn't think the Chinese just had them. Yeah, we have them too. These things have, quarantine, negative pressure filters or isolation units. We got plenty of equipment that we can helicopter in a few hours' notice once the hospital rooms start to get overwhelmed. But here's the problem. If we don't close the schools, if we don't encourage social distance, then everybody is going to get this at once. And there won't be any backup. There won't be any MASH tents. There won't be any extra workers running from other hospitals because their emergency rooms will also be full. So the whole point, slow it down and phase it in gradually. Now there's another reason that I want to talk about that nobody's talking about. But believe me, the healthcare experts are acutely aware of this. So now you're going to be aware of it, and hopefully you won't panic. But a little problem is something that's been going on for about, 4.1 billion years. Anyone know what it is? It's called evolution. Yeah, evolution. And I've explained in previous videos that coronaviruses are very variable and adaptable. What that means is if you let them burn through the population with person-to-person spread, and you don't do anything to limit the mixing of other coronaviruses commonly passed between humans, then, well, you might get lots of different coronaviruses. We saw what happened when one Wuhan worker went in with a coronavirus and got bit by a bat or whatever. What happens when millions and billions of people get to mix their coronaviruses with this new virus? Yeah, look, human beings are nothing but petri dishes to these things. We are their host. We are their prey. They force our cells to make other viruses, and in this case, in the case of coronaviruses, they have a wide genetic diversity, and they can spew out different versions of the same virus. So you might be immune to one version, but you're not immune to the other versions. That's why you get the common cold every year. So we can get a whole plethora of deadly viruses in just a very short period of time. We're talking next year. So what happens if we mix and match these viruses freely? Well, MERS, Middle East Respiratory Virus, has a 40% death rate, even with medical treatment. And 100% of the people who get it get really sick. And the common cold has a 0% death rate. And it sweeps through the entire human population like a scythe through grown wheat. And what happens when you combine a 40% death rate with sweeping through the entire population? Yeah, let's not even add in the social disruption and the and everything else from this end of days scenario. But that's what we're looking at if we don't contain this virus. So Rush, my good hero, a man who is right 98% of the time. This is why everything is being shut down. Swine flu is bad. It's very bad. And the media definitely gave Biden and Obama a pass. But we know all about flu viruses. We know what the flu looks like. We know that it makes other flu viruses. We know that it basically evolves to change the protein coat so it has different ways of attaching into the human body, different receptors and different entries into the human body. It doesn't typically evolve to anything like much above 0.1% mortality, certainly with modern medicine. So nothing approaching 30-40% mortality that we see with some of these coronaviruses. So you can see the problem, I hope. In other words, you don't have a huge variation where, really mild flu and even the most deadly flu is about 0.1% lethality. This is much more than that, most likely. So we don't want it to spread. We don't want it to evolve into 10,000 other viruses. Frankly, if that happens, that's end of days. That's not just the end of civilization. That's the end of the human race. And yes, there are species that have died from multiple viral assaults like this. One of the leading theories of dinosaurs is that the reason the comet offed them is that they were under heavy viral assault at the time the comet hit. This could be the end of days if we don't stop it. But we will stop it. COVID-19 made a mistake when it started killing humans, because we are going to destroy this just as we have destroyed all who came before them. Anything that thought they could get away with attacking humans has been destroyed, and COVID-19 is no different.
Is there no one else?